Hello and welcome to Keeping It Young podcast, conversations about marriage, family, and ministry life. I'm Dave.
And I'm Bethlie.
And we are the Youngs.
Thank you for joining us.
Hey everybody, we hope you're enjoying our series that we're doing right now about training our boys to become men and training our girls to become ladies.
Yes.
And we haven't even gotten to the ladies yet, our girls, but we are talking a lot about training our boys to be men.
Right. And well, I'm sure we'll cover a lot when we get there.
Absolutely, we will.
Yes.
And we talked this week, or so far in these series, we've been talking to you about the importance of starting early with our sons. Mm-hmm. My goodness, moms and dads, if you've got little ones right now, you've got to be thinking about how do we train this young man.
Right.
And the danger in our culture is just to let it go. And he's just 2, she's just 4, or rather, he's just 4, or, he's 6, or he's just 13.
Right.
Our culture tends to think in that terminology. But God's plan for us is that we start right away training our sons for the adult they're supposed to be.
Right.
And our boys are supposed to be godly. They're supposed to be leaders. They're supposed to be masculine. They're supposed to be loving. They're supposed to be hardworking. And they're supposed to have character and integrity, honesty. They're supposed to know how to do things because they are responsible to take care of a family and of their belongings when they're on their own. So there's a ton that goes into this. And so don't wait. Get started right away. And start early.
And there are ways to train, and we've discussed them in the last few episodes of training our boys to be men, but I was just sitting here thinking, maybe you just need to let them be men. A little boy, typically, and this is just generally speaking, but little boys will be boys. They will be making noise with their little trucks as they're going along on the floor, and they may even have some rough behavior that you will have to curb. Obviously, you don't want your boy to throw his Tonka truck at his sister's head, so you would have to curb that. But there are things that they just have this aggression that they don't know what to do with. And so sometimes moms can be like, no, don't do that. And girls, I know when your boys are wrestling in the living room, it can be a little, can I use the word irritating? Because girls don't all of a sudden are just like, okay, I just need to pin someone to the floor. Girls just aren't thinking that way. And so your boys will. Your 5-year-old, your 6-year-old, he will think, okay, I'm going to try to put my dad on the floor, even though in his 5 and 6-year-old body, he can't do it. And so dad and the little boy are wrestling, and mom is just thinking, boy, they're just making a lot of noise. There's a lot of racket. Something might get broken. You might need to put a few little boundaries, or just ask your husband to have some boundaries with that. But you need to let them be a boy. And that
is a super good point, because so many people in our culture, they work so hard to get their boy to sit quietly.
Yes.
For lack of a better term, to act like a girl.
Right.
To sit quietly, to be docile, to be calm, to be quiet. And yet God designed our boys to be protectors, to be hard workers, to be energetic, to have the reason he designed them with testosterone is so that they would be strong leaders, and they would be soldiers, and they would be farmers, and they would work hard and be diligent.
Yes.
And so accept that, moms. And of course, you don't have to be unwise about it. We don't want to let a kid hurt himself, but it's good for kids to do dangerous things. It is.
And too, just for the boy to be able to get out that energy that they have, to learn how to focus that, for lack of a better word, I keep using the word aggression, and I'm not sure that's the word I want to use, but that drive that boys have to see how things work, or to see what's going to happen if they, try to pin dad to the floor, or, just to get out that muscular energy that they have. So I'm sure that there are ways to train them to do that wisely, but I hear from so many moms that just gets on their nerves, and they just don't want their boys to do it. So there has to be a way that you let your boys be boys.
Yes, and there's a balance there, and the balance is that misbehavior is always wrong. So if a child is misbehaving, if he's being unkind, if he's being, foolish, if he's being, sinful,
Yes.
that's a whole different ballgame.
Yes, it is.
But when a young boy is just being a boy, he likes things that are loud. He likes things that are aggressive. He likes to climb a tree.
Right.
He wants to try to ramp the bicycle. All of those things. And our fear in our culture is, oh my goodness, what if they get scraped? What if they get, cut? What if they get a bruise?
Right.
What if they fall? Well, all of those things happen, and the culture we live in tends to maximize every event of that sort.
True.
But those events are typically, one in a million.
Yes.
Almost. And so let your boys be men. Let them even start that early. That desire, that masculine desire, that masculine drive.
Right.
And don't train them to be girls. That is a very good point.
No, and you know what? If you have to, if you're like, oh, it's just so loud, they're so noisy, or they're thumping around up there and they're wrestling, then do something with them. Get them outside and say, okay, here's a ball. Go in the backyard, kick it back and forth, or see how many times you can hit that tree trunk with that ball. Just get that energy out and allowing them to be boys instead of saying, here, come sit at the table with your sister and color. There may be a time where they just need to be quiet, and that's okay. And, to collect themselves. But for the most part, let them be boys.
Right. And that may mean you need to do something with them. It may mean you need to take them biking, or you need to take them rollerblading.
Right.
Or it may mean that, you need to go out in the backyard with them and goof around.
Right.
You mean to go swimming with them. Boys like action.
Absolutely. Our son, Matthew has so much energy, and Matthew still has a lot of energy. He's 23 years old. And in homeschooling, Matthew, sometimes I could just tell. And now I never was the homeschool mom who, okay, you have to sit, the way they sit in school. I never made my kids do that. But, if he was getting so antsy that he could not even pay attention, I remember several times being like, okay, Matt, take a lap or two around the RV, because we would be out traveling and in our meetings. And so we had our RV with us, our travel trailer at that time. And Matt would just book it for all he was worth around that RV so many times. And, I'd call him in after 5 minutes or so, and he would have gotten out that energy, and we were ready to go again.
And we taught our boys, to use whips. In the sense that we went through this thing where we bought them all whips, and then we taught them how to do all these tricks with their whips, and they could make them pop really loudly. And there was a guy that we knew who was a professional with whips, as far as he had set several, world records and things he did with them and everything. And he taught our boys how to stand at attention and, do one action with their right hand and then flip the whip to their left hand and mirror that. So it was teaching them to be ambidextrous. And they could go, they did this thing where they stood at attention but took the whip around the clock. They made it pop at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, on the clock face. And, and the fear was, what if they, get what if it smacks them up the side of the head? Well, it did. And you're wiser for it, and, so there's a little welt on the kid's face. It'll go down, and your son will enjoy that.
Right. And we had rules, nobody could be close while they were doing that. They had to be careful about who was around them. And
yeah. So you start early. That's the point.
Yes. But I was just pushing in the point there that we just need to allow them to do manly things.
Absolutely. So start early, get them working, allow them to do manly things. And then let's pick up where we left off last week. Let's get them working out. As soon as possible, get your boys to start working out.
Certainly one of my favorite things is to work out. Oh, wait.
Now, you exercise every day.
I do. I walk. And I do enjoy that. I do enjoy that. But as far as going out, we have a little, gym or fitness center set up in our garage, a little workout center for the boys. And it has never occurred to me to be like, oh, let me go out there and lift weights.
But all of our sons have.
But all of our sons have, and they have all of them have enjoyed it and spent hours and hours and hours in that very hot garage.
And I used it today.
Yes. And
bodies like this don't come cheap.
Let's get on to our point before I say something flirty and embarrass our whole audience.
Ooh, go ahead. The whole point is that it's training our boys to become men. One of the things God designed our boys with is their testosterone.
Yes.
And that testosterone gives them strength, and it affects them in just so many unbelievable ways. Mm-hmm. And getting your boys working out is just a real strong part in helping our boys to become men.
Right.
And that may mean that you as a family need to invest in some exercise equipment. You don't have to, build the biggest gym in the world. But what I've discovered, in our family was, a lot of people will go to a gym.
Right.
But going to a gym means it takes time, it takes money.
Yes.
And you got to get there, you work out, then you got to get back home. Mm-hmm. If at all possible, having a gym at home is just incredibly helpful because it's right there.
Right. And it is an investment, like a one-time investment. But we have found most of the stuff that we've gotten has been, like on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or something like that. And it absolutely is worth the little bit of investment because all three of our boys and David has used it. And we've even had neighborhood kids ask if they can use it and kids in our church ask if they can use it. So
absolutely. And the fact of the matter is having that equipment has been an incredible investment because of the fact that it gave our boys an outlet for their energy.
Yes.
And it helped them in their teen years to develop strength.
Yes.
And they became stronger for it.
Well, and it's a focus for that testosterone because they're not the little boy anymore who's just rolling around in the floor with their dad. Although I will say that when they're all here, they all still try to put their dad down or their brother. But it gives them a more focused, more mature outlet for their testosterone.
Absolutely. And, dads, you may need to do it with them. In other words, if you have a son that is very reluctant, that your kid, all he wants to do is play video games. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe it's time that you start doing the work with him. Mm-hmm. Buy some exercise equipment, and maybe all you need to do is walk a mile and then, do so many push-ups or sit-ups.
Right.
You can work out with a son in a variety of ways there. But you could also, invest in equipment and it will be a good thing for you and a good thing for him. Plus, it's a connection time.
Right.
And you could, talk while you're doing this. You can listen to music together. And what we discovered with our sons is doing things with the boys brings closeness.
Right.
And then you're also showing them how to do things. You're working together with them. And you're watching them become men, and there's just something pretty amazing about that.
It is. And it does, from what I understand, I don't know everything about the way the boys work out and everything, but they have, you have trained them some, and then some other young men who have traveled in our ministry have trained them some. And there is, can I say, a little bit of an art to working out. There isn't just, well, let me go out there and curl these weights a little bit. There's, well, let me, I know the boys have talked about, I have leg day and arm day and ab day, and I don't know what all they are, but there is an art to it that does take some training on the part of either the dad or someone in their life.
Any workout is profitable.
Right.
But there is a training that can go along with working out that helps it to be the most advantageous.
Right.
And so that's what you're referring to.
And that's all part of, I think, training them in part of their masculinity.
Absolutely. Now, here's another thing when you're talking about getting their kids to work out, utilize sports. Let's talk about the big sports issue. Utilize sports, but control it. Mm. And what we mean by that is that sometimes we find that parents are can begin to think like this: my son is fine, he plays ball.
Right.
My son is fine, he's a football player.
Right.
But that your son can carry a football down a field does not mean he's going to be prepared to be a husband or a daddy,
right,
or handle finances. It doesn't mean that he actually has character to show up for time on time for work,
right,
to finish a job day in and day out. Mm-hmm. And so you utilize sports where it works for your family to train your boys to become men, but you have to keep it in its proper perspective. If it's the only thing you're using, it will not work.
True.
It will not work. And it will undermine, sports can undermine more important things. Mm. It can undermine a church, because sometimes sports and church conflict.
Yes.
So it can undermine a church. It can also undermine teaching our sons to work. Because our children think of sports as fun and with their friends.
True.
But work is oftentimes the mundane responsibility day in and day out for a lifetime.
That is very true.
And so you have to be very wise about sports. Keep it as a proper, schedule wisely and keep it as a proper priority.
Right.
And moms and dads, if your son is playing sports year round and you're stretched to the max because you're running and you're never at home and you never eat together, and your kid never reads his Bible because he doesn't have time, and he doesn't have any spiritual life because everything is about sports. Every parent knows that it's a rare thing that their son will grow up and make a living from sports. That's a very rare thing.
I would hope that parents would know that. So if you don't know that, maybe you should consider that.
I would think parents do know that.
Yes.
But mostly what happens in our culture is that parents just go with the flow.
Right.
The kids go to school and every friend they have plays ball. So my kid plays ball.
Right.
And of course it's not, a lot of what we do involves the Christian school realm. The Christian school realm is that usually it's a smaller school, so you need more players. So everybody plays ball.
We need more participation, yes.
Everybody's involved. And we in our culture tend to celebrate the kid that plays ball. A kid that learns how to play a violin will play the violin, chances are, until he dies.
True.
But he will not be recognized in the same way that a kid who can dunk a basketball will be recognized. So we can easily put sports out of a priority. It is a passing thing rather than a permanent thing.
It is.
And you have to prioritize. Moms and dads, you have to think wisely about sports, or you will undermine the training of your boys to become men.
Well, I was just thinking of the area of priorities, keeping a balance in your own home, and that's up to you, mom and dad. Keeping the balance of the sports schedule. Your child cannot keep the balance there. If they're going to be involved, you have to do the research ahead of time and say, okay, how many times a week are you going to practice? How long does this season last? How many times are you going to have to travel to play ball? How many times are we going to be home for a home game? And all of those things, that's up to you as the mom and dad to say, I know that my child would love to play this sport, but let's see how it's going to affect our family time or church time. And then going from there and saying, okay, it's okay for you to play this. But that teaches your child to have that balance of, is this going to go totally take over my life for the next 6 months, instead of this is just a tool that we're using to help you become a better adept at basketball or soccer or football or baseball or whatever it is.
And one of the things we could say it like this is sports should be a tool to help your boys to become men.
Yes.
And if at any time sports is not helping your boys to become men, then it's time to make a change.
Right.
And if sports are teaching your boys to do things that aren't manly, then it's time to make a change. Because a lot of times sports will celebrate anger.
True.
He didn't get his way, or that was a bad call, and wasn't that funny how he threw a fit on the court and threw the ball, or threw his glove in the field, or yelled at the ref, or even cussed. And sometimes even parents are a bad illustration, because they say things from the stands they shouldn't say, or they get a technical foul called on them, or get kicked out of a game, or whatever. Those issues are always teaching our boys that here's how you respond when you don't like it.
Right.
But that response is unbiblical. That response is unwise. That response is not training our boys to be men. It's training our boys to be angry. And that this is okay to respond this way.
Right.
Well, moms and dads, that's why sports has to be evaluated continually. Is the sports, is your young man, your son, his participation in sports, is it helping him to become a man?
Right.
And if it's not, then you are responsible as a mom and dad to make a change.
Right.
And it'll be hard in a culture like ours.
Yes.
But it's vital, because we have to train our boys to become men. And anything hindering our boys from becoming men has to be changed.
Well, and what an opportunity, though, if they do have opportunity to play sports, for him to be a godly, manly example that is totally counter-cultural, unfortunately, even in the Christian realm, because our children, of course, are homeschooled, so they don't go to all of the Christian school games and things like that. But we have heard over and over and over again of Christian parents who display ungodly testimonies at games because of how they get so caught up in the game and they just lose their temper at a ref or at a coach. And so, of course, our children are going to follow that example. But what an opportunity if your child can play sports and it's a good training opportunity for them, for you to be training them specifically, as we're talking about here, your boys, to react in a godly, manly way.
So evaluate. Just evaluate. Are you... Is your son? Can your son? Is sports helping him to learn how to lose graciously? Does a loss when he loses a ball game that is insignificant in the grand scheme of life, does it ruin his entire week? Is he learning to handle a bad call or even a good call with grace and dignity and respect? And unless you're evaluating sports, unless you are aware of what is this doing to my son to help him become a man, if you're not evaluating it, you're probably failing in that area. And so that may be a little strong. But moms and dads, one of the things we have witnessed is that sports can be a great detriment in a Christian family because it gets out of balance.
Right.
And so here's a couple of suggestions. Make sure that church is more important than sports.
Yes.
Make sure that family is more important than sports.
Absolutely.
And you prioritize that, and make sure that work is more important than sports. Because your son may be a great basketball player, so let him play basketball, but keep it in balance. He will work, however, the rest of his life. So make sure that work is the priority over sports.
Right. Even during your sports season, make sure he still has chores to do when he comes home or on the weekends.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so this is important. Get them working out. That's what we're talking about.
I was even going to comment, and this is going to sound a little off the wall, but my sister and I just took a little sister trip, which was awesome. And of course, while we were on our sister trip, we shopped. But in one of the places we went into there, how they have all the signs that you can now buy for your house to display. And one of the signs that I saw said, our kids are finally at the age where they have started sleeping in. Yay for Saturday. And then it was like ... Oh, wait, sports schedule. And so even our world is recognizing that our children are way too scheduled when it comes to the sports schedule. So maybe we as Christians should back it up in the Christian home and say, okay, is this going to actually help my child to mature and we're talking about men here, to mature as a young man, or is it just going to teach him that, he can run and run and run and run and really not learn anything that will help him be a godly man?
Absolutely. So the point overall is get them working out, and you have to be wise about it. It's good for our boys to have exercise. It's good for them to have sports. It's good for them to be very involved in active events.
Yes.
Very involved. But be wise about it. Remember, the Bible says that bodily exercise profits little, but godliness is profitable to all things.
Yes.
And he's comparing the fact there that many things in life pass away, but there are other things that have eternal value.
Yes.
And be very careful when you're training your sons that your focus is more on the things that have eternal value than on the things that have passing value.
Right.
And so very, very important. Well, let's just kind of wind things up here a little bit in the next few moments. One of the things you have to do in teaching your boys to be men is to train them in areas of importance. And we've already mentioned work. That's an area of importance.
Yes.
Finances. That's an area of importance. They have to learn to give. They have to learn to save. They have to learn to know this is how you get finances. This is how you balance finances.
Right.
And our children, when they get older, we often will have them become familiar with different, principles like maybe the Dave Ramsey principles and things of that sort. So there's a ton of help out there. You have to help in areas of respect.
Right.
And that's a big one.
And that's one you should be training from infancy.
Very early.
Yes.
Respect for authority. A yes sir, yes ma'am. What do you do? What do you do when it's a bad, you maybe got pulled over for the wrong thing, as a teenager, or maybe the ref did make a bad call. You still show respect.
Yes.
Even the bad things in life are an opportunity for you to handle it wisely, and you got to train your boys in that regard.
Yes. Well, I just always think my mom used to say to us as girls, and I think it would be applicable to the boys, the fruit of the Spirit doesn't go out of the window just because you've had a bad day, or just because something is not going your way, or maybe someone thinks something wrong about you that's just not true. You still have the Holy Spirit indwelling you. You can still bring forth the fruit of the Spirit.
Right. And so this is important. You're training respect. And you want to train your boys to have respect for ladies. And in the culture we live in, it is amazing how if a guy holds the door for a lady now, sometimes a lady will refuse to walk through that door.
Right.
And you know what? I still think it's wise for boys to learn how to show respect for ladies. If a lady then refuses to receive the respect, in our culture, we have to train our sons. What do you do then?
Yep. You just say, "Oh, I'm sorry, didn't mean to offend you.
Or
I'll let you get the
then,
door."
You just, shake the dust off your feet, and to use a Bible term. But
I know that sometimes our boys would get, when we were traveling and they were all together, and sometimes they would get back in the van and they would say, "Mom, I tried to open that door. I tried to hold the door for the lady and she didn't want me to. She got mad at me." And so I just wanted to be like, "Well, fine, let me slam the door and you can open it yourself." And we were always like, no, that's not the way to do it.
And the fact of the matter is, if a lady will not allow a young man to open the door for her, it's a sign that nobody taught her to be a lady.
True.
So that will be coming up in future sessions.
There we go.
And one of the things we have to train our boys that's an area of importance is in purity, to where they have to embrace purity. Moms and dads, you can protect your children up one side and down the other. But in the culture we live in, the true victory in this area of purity comes when our children begin to fight the battle themselves alongside of you.
Right.
And they want the victory and they see the importance of it. And we have to continually train our sons to think that way.
Right. Well, this takes vigilance on your part, but not just thinking, well, we have covenant eyes on all of the devices in our house and we only watch movies through VidAngel or anything like that. That's wonderful. And you need that kind of vigilance, those kind of safeguards put up. But I think it also takes place when you have those conversations that might be a little bit uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And we are running out of time today. And before we leave this this teaching, this talk about training our boys to become men, I think we do need one more session because there's a couple of areas we need to pick up. We want to share with you some areas where we've seen some of our friends, some tools they've used, some steps they've taken, some ways they've help their sons to become men. So we want to give some illustrations to make things very practical for you parents who want to train your boys.
Okay.
But we also should give some warnings and just some cautions. We do live in a culture. One of the things that keeps coming up a lot is this idea that church is designed for women. And we want to talk about that a little bit, moms and dads, what to be aware of there, and even maybe say a word to you pastors to be aware of the fact that church should appeal to men as well.
Yes.
And so there's a few more things we'll cover, and then we're looking forward here to very shortly starting to discuss with you about how to train your girls to become ladies. Any final thoughts before we go today?
I think we've covered pretty much everything, and I am looking forward to the practical episode.
Absolutely.
That'll be good.
And before we go, just remember to check out mypillow.com. Use the promo code YOUNG, and you can find all kinds of savings and discounts using that code.
Yes.
And that's a way to support the Keeping It Young. And then we are so thankful for our friends at thechurchcrew.com.
Yes.
What a program our friend has put together to help local churches. It's simple, it's practical, takes a little bit of work at the beginning, and once you have everything input and organized, it just is a tool that will help your church with all of its volunteer staff.
Yes.
And it's affordable. I can't say enough good about it. Check it out, thechurchcrew.com, and make sure that you let them know that you are a listener of the Keeping It Young podcast. And we would be grateful for that. This is Keeping It Young, and we're so grateful for all of you that reach out to us. You're certainly welcome to message us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can even go to the keepingityoungpodcast.com and send us a message from there via email or via the voice text. You'll find the microphone in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. We would love to hear from you. Reach out anytime. It would be our privilege to serve you. In the meantime, serve the Lord with gladness.
The Keeping It Young podcast is a Bax 5 Media production.